a new document, the NHS Constitution, has been put out for consultation. I advise everybody to actually put their tuppence worth in on this. And it's a document that aims to set out, they say, the principles and values of the health service and the legal rights for patients and staff. It was last updated in 2015, and legally it has to be updated by the Health Secretary every 10 years. And as part of this document, this is going to blow your mind, everybody, the NHS is set to declare that sex is a matter of biology. And quite simply, that biological sex is a fact and it is real. We are defining sex as biological sex, not what, I'm paraphrasing here, not what a bloke thinks he is on a Wednesday afternoon. Well, let's talk about this with Executive Director of Sex Matters, Maya Forstater. Good morning to you, Maya.
Hello, Julia.
Well, isn't it a wonderful day when the people who are in charge of the health of our nation, keeping us alive, giving us health treatment to look after us, apparently do know that men and women are biologically different. Well done them.
Isn't it? Finally, it's an outbreak of common sense.
I mean, it really does blow my mind that this needs to be said. And one of the things I've mentioned before, I had a right old go at the Health Secretary for Atkins when I saw it at an event quite a few weeks back about, you can't just give guidance on things, like what happening in schools or in hospitals. You need to make it really clear what you can and can't do because women are being thrown under a bus. Now, we understand this isn't just about, declaring the difference. It's about, trans women, i.e. men, being in women-only wards. This is also about the language that is used in NHS health warnings, so people with cervixes and people with ovaries. And yet suddenly it's always about men with prostate problems, isn't it? And testicular cancer. It's never about people with testicular cancer. And actually recognising the reality of that. And mums, not being chest feeders, but breastfeeders. Do you think that this is a real sea change, or is this just tinkering around the edges?
I do. I do think it's a sea change. It starts with the Principle 1 of the NHS Constitution, which says that the NHS is for everybody, and it lays out the protected characteristics in the Equality Act. And when it was written in 2009, someone snuck in gender instead of sex, and that's where the trouble started.
Right.
And so then every time they made a policy about protecting women or single-sex services, whether that's who you're sharing a hospital ward with or who's examining you, wherever they said sex, they got confused and they replaced it with gender identity.
Yeah.
So they're starting right at the top, and hopefully that will feed through into all of the operational policies. And they'll do what they said.
But how is this allowed to happen? Because this is the thing that I find so frustrating is, again, when the Tories act on these things, you think, great, well done, because I'm sorry, that I think Labour and Lib Dems, the SNP, and I'll get to the SNP with you, are frankly all mad on a load of this stuff. They're fully signed up to what we're told is progressive agenda. It's not. It's a misogynistic, anti-women and anti-gay agenda, I would say, as well. And yet, Tories have been in power for 14 years. Suddenly, have they realised that lots of women care about this and actually it might affect our vote?
Quite possibly. It's very interesting what the response has been from the Doctors' Union, from the NHS Confederation, which is the group of NHS senior managers. They've all said, what about the poor trans women? Oh. None of them have come back and said, this is great, this gives clarity to our healthcare professionals to know that they can look after women and girls. And that reflects the capture of NHS institutions and professions.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw in the Cass report, didn't we, just a few weeks ago, that the extraordinary power that organisations like Stonewall, once a fantastic fight, on the vanguard for gay rights, now busily undermining gay men and women with their obsession with trans rights, and organisations like Mermaids, run by a woman who took her 16-year-old son to Thailand to cut his tackle off. I mean, I'm sorry, that's a fact. That is literally a fact. The idea that these organisations should have any input to what happens in the NHS is extraordinary. And the idea that these organisations and the policies that they push are regarded as progressive. Oh, and by the way, taxpayers funding a lot of that work.
Yes, absolutely. I hope that every political party is going to recognise that this is not what people want. What people want is privacy and dignity. What they want is their healthcare records to be clear and accurate, even for trans people, even for people who say they're non-binary. Their doctors still need to know whether they're male or female, and that needs to be recorded clearly. And people like Matthew Taylor of the NHS Confederation are calling this a culture war. It's not a culture war.
It's a fact war. It's a fact war, and we're on the side of facts.
Yeah.
I am so fed up, and I'm sure you are, as someone who lost your job just for stating biological fact. You know, no hatred, no transphobia, it's biological fact. And thankfully won your case on appeal. That we're accused of a culture war. We didn't start this. We were just getting on with our lives. You had a job, I had a job, we got on with it. And then suddenly people started saying that, well, you know, you're a subset of women. You know, and you don't actually have the rights to the sort of safe spaces and the private spaces which are, you know, our mums will have fought for us to have. We didn't start this war.
Absolutely. We didn't start this. We didn't make it a culture war. But these organisations, by adopting these crazy policies, have made it into a war. And it's not going to end until we get women's rights and privacy and dignity back.
Yeah, indeed. Although I have thought, though, under this Constitution, one of the things it suggests is that, you know, trans women, i.e. men, trans-identified men is what we should be calling them, not trans women. They aren't women. They can live like that. They can call themselves what they like. They can grow their hair, wear a wig, have a boob job. They can do whatever they want, wear whatever dresses you want. That doesn't make you a woman. Live your life the best way you want, but you don't get to call yourself a woman, and you don't get to be in safe spaces that are legally protected for women, except when the wokes are in charge. But the key thing about that is there seems to be so much concern for them. But they say, well, maybe these people will get, you know, their own private wards, you know, private rooms. I'm thinking, great. Well, next time I have to go into hospital for an op, I'm going to claim to be a trans man, so I can. Which I think I could easily do. I've got a firm chin. I could, you know, I've got broad shoulders. I'm tall. I mean, you know, and therefore I can get a private room. I mean, this is not the solution.
No, and I think the devil will be in the detail. Yeah. And what it says is that people can get private rooms, and people, you know, clinicians can allocate people, nurses can allocate people to private rooms for all kinds of reasons, and it's going to depend on who needs them, what the medical need is. Yeah. So it definitely doesn't say that trans people should be
given a priority,
guaranteed a private room. And then there's the question of in which ward. So this is not just the kinds of wards, you know, with beds with curtains around. They're also mental health wards where people are walking around, they're interacting. You know, it's not just a question of is somebody in a separate bedroom, but also when people are moving around and interacting, are women being forced to pretend that men are women? Yeah.
And staff as well, that's the thing. Just finally, I do want to ask your thoughts on Humza Yousaf going. Again, he mentioned the culture wars. It was the SNP that started it in Scotland. They've been in power all these years. Do you think that, you know, there's some hope for some sanity returning, both in Scotland as well as in England?
I really hope so. I mean, I think for so long people have looked at this issue and said, oh, it's toxic, it's a culture war, it's not serious, you know, it's too dangerous to talk about. And, you know, that's now come home to roost for Humza Yousaf. And I really hope that Scotland will also follow in things like getting its NHS back to seeing that is real.
Fingers crossed. Maya Forstater, you've been fantastic on this. You've been a warrior queen. Executive Director of Sex Matters, thank you very much. Quick word from Tom Slater.
No, just another reminder that the toxicity, the culture, if you want to call it that, was only ever coming from one direction. It was coming from the trans activists, from politicians who were just mindlessly repeating their talking points.
Bigger, bigger, bigger. Transphobe.
If it wasn't for them, this would never have been a discussion, let alone a toxic one. So
exactly. Thank you very much indeed. Well, you've been a fine ally on this. 11:47 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk about Thursday's local elections and mayoral elections. There's also a by-election. What's going to happen? Is it going to be a drubbing for the Tories? And what does that mean for Rishi Sunak's future as Prime Minister?